This is the Be One Change One podcast, where our mission is to help listeners define values, practice integrity, and inspire change.
Our vision is to mentor men and empower them to achieve more by taking responsibility for shaping their own lives.
He's Cass, an evolving man who has been shaped by adversity and continues to grow through his imperfections.
And he's Roscoe, an imperfect work in progress that tries to suck less every day.
Between us, we have over 40 years of Air Force fighter pilot experience with countless hours as trainers, instructors, and mentors.
Join us and learn to take responsibility for your own life as we dive into subjects from leadership to resilience to vulnerability.
Be the one who changes their course. Be decisive, driven, and purposeful. Set the example for others. Lead. We wish we'd had this show when we were younger men.
Be the one.
So here's the deal, dude. I want you to do me a favor, man.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to blow your mind. I want you to close your computer for a second.
Okay.
I'm going to call an audible.
Okay.
All right. So how does every good fighter pilot story start?
So there I was.
There I was. All right. This is about January or so this year. And I've been reading these stupid thriller novels for a long time. And I was into one, and it was by a new author. It was a new one, and it wasn't terribly great, right? And it was kind of one of those where you saw all the turns coming.
Yeah.
And it was a quick one. I got through it really quick, but it didn't really just tickle my fancy too much. So I got this idea, and I just started thinking, I was like, I wonder if I'm creative enough to just make shit up.
Yeah.
Right. To just write fiction. I've never done it before.
Yeah.
And I like to think that I'm a decent enough storyteller.
You're a good storyteller.
But it's so much more when you try to put together something like that.
Especially when you have to put it into Word on paper.
It's very difficult,
Yeah.
right? And so I started doing a lot of research. YouTube is fantastic, Reddit, and there's a lot of forums out there that are just fantastic at just author meetups and the hows and the whys and suggestions and just learning processes. And it's like learning a new language. It really is. And so this goes on for, I don't know, a couple of months or so. And I had an idea that I was going to write, like I wanted to do a historical fiction thing. And I wanted to do Benedict Arnold's story. He's one of the most fascinating historical characters to me, right? And just his rise and fall. And there's so many things that are mixed into his history that made him the person he is. And there's certainly an argument that his country failed him as much as he failed his country.
Yeah.
And I love that he's such a polarizing character in a lot of ways, right? And so I thought if I could use that as the scaffolding and then weave some of my characters through there, that might be a decent place to start, right? Rather than creating like we had, what was his name? The author that we had on, your guy. The Ember Wars dude.
Oh yeah, Richard Fox.
Yeah, Richard Fox. We had him on, and he just creates these whole worlds.
Yeah, he does, man.
And he's brilliant at it.
Yeah,
right?
really good.
I didn't know if I had that in me yet, right now, right? So I started. I got papers out, and I started sketching out character timelines and really polishing up my knowledge of the Benedict Arnold story and watching a lot of documentaries and reading a lot about all the characters that, like the main characters that were kind of in that during that time. And then on a random fucking night, I watched a JFK conspiracy documentary on Amazon, and it was about the Parkland doctors at the Parkland Hospital there. And dude, it grabbed me, and I've probably got a stack of books this big, all on the JFK conspiracy. I've read the Warren Commission report. I've got a book. I found a book at Goodwill, and this is how the universe manifests itself sometimes, right? Katie and I went to eat, and there's a Goodwill in the parking lot of this restaurant that we'd like to go to. And our family tradition is we go out to eat, and then we go to Goodwill, and we just kind of walk it off a little bit because it's really good. It's seafood, and we stuff ourselves, and then we go kind of walk it off in Goodwill a little bit, and we always take the kids and we have fun. And so Katie and I did that, and on the shelf I found a no shit like from I think it was from like 1976. It's a hardback leather-bound book about that thick on Allen Dulles, who was the former director of the CIA right around the JFK thing, right? And a lot of people point to him as the dude that orchestrated all that shit, right? No shit, man. Like, who would have ever thunk it? For $2 in a Goodwill, I found this, right? So anyways, I started, I flipped from Benedict Arnold to JFK and was going to use that as my scaffolding, because how easy is that shit, right? There's so much controversy around it. There's so much. I mean, there's people who are diehard. Oswald did it. There are people who are diehard. No, he didn't. And there's very few people that are in the middle that are open-minded to both sides. And it's really cool when you start going down both of those and to see the contrasts between the two. So I started writing. And I started tinkering, and I came up with a character, and I came up with more characters, and I came up with more storylines. And that was in, I guess it was about March is when I really started, typing things out. And I had to learn. I've never written dialogue before. I had to learn how to write dialogue and have a conversation in my mind, and then somehow get that on paper. Right. And holy shit, what a challenge. Had a couple of dudes. I sought out mentors. And I started calling people around. I got on a couple of forums on Facebook and just fucking cold called people and be like, hey, man, you've written books. I'm thinking about writing a book. Want to chat? And they're like, yeah, sure. And we chatted up on it for an hour when I was out for my walk, and got one dude out in California who is a professor of English that I got linked to him through a series of people. And he ended up being one of my go-to guys to bounce ideas off of and send him, like, here's a chapter I just wrote. Tell me if it sucks or not, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And he gave me some good feedback. Like, yeah, your character is kind of terrible. Okay, well, I'll do better. Right.
Yeah.
So that was in about March-ish. By about 2 weeks before we left to go on our Norway trip in June, I had the rough draft finished. At least I thought it did. Right. So V1 was done before we went to Norway, and then I shelved it for 2 months.
Yeah.
Shelved it for the summer.
It's probably good.
It
Step
was.
away.
It was really good.
Give you a little clarity going back to it, because I'd imagine that's a little bit of an overwhelming process, and you can get lost in. I would imagine you can get lost. I would get lost in the minutia a little bit, because there's so much swirling around in your brain that there's probably certain things where you're like, oh, that'd be really good to do, but then it's not time to bring it forward, and then it slips through the cracks somehow, or I don't know. That would be hard for me,
bro. There was a 2 or 3 month stretch there where I didn't go anywhere without my phone in my pocket or a pen and a piece
so
of
you
paper.
could put
because
if something popped into your brain,
exactly,
you could note it out.
I mean, I'm driving down the road and I'm like, oh, what if he said this to her at this point?
That's why I love this scribe.
Something that quick, and it's like, well, you can't carry that in your pocket though.
No,
when you're out jogging.
No, yeah, not when I'm jogging.
I'm out jogging, listening to a podcast. I'm like, oh, that's really good. What if he said this to her? And I write it down, or I capture it on my phone real fast. And the fucking voice memos on this thing, God, they've been
lifesaver.
Huge. Oh yeah, dude. I'll have full up conversations between two characters on a voice memo, and then I can come back and re-listen to it and type it out.
Yeah.
So just little things like that you just don't even think of, man. And it was so fun to learn that process, just the learning of how to do it. And I'm not good at it, right? Not yet.
Yeah.
But it's an iterative thing, right?
Well, even when we talked to Richard, right, he was talking about the first couple books he wrote.
They were terrible.
Yeah, they were not good, right? Because it's a skill, and it's something that you have to. It's like anything else, right? You go through the process, and then you figure out how to refine it, and how to make it work for you, and how to find efficiencies, and it's the whole practice makes perfect thing that we talk about.
Well, I mean, and to be fair, I had written 2 books before, right? I wrote No New Lessons.
Yeah, but this is different.
And I wrote Work Hard, Don't Suck. But both of those books didn't take a lot of research necessarily. I mean, there was a couple of details that I had to go and read up on.
And I would imagine, like you were saying too, just writing dialogue it's like
tough.
A completely different thing.
When it's dialogue that you didn't experience. Like I could sit down and I could write the dialogue from this podcast because you and I did it. But when you're just totally making shit up, like I got a scene where my 2 main characters are sitting on the beach. They just met last night and they met up back on the beach the next morning and they're having a conversation. What the fuck is that conversation about?
Yeah.
Is she bubbly? Is she
and how do you express that, right? How do you convey that in words?
With the googly eyes to him, and is he just like stoic and sitting staring at the ocean and being like, yes, no, I don't know. Is he robotic? So there were so many of those things that, gosh, man, it was so much fun to really just go into that creative space and be sitting on the table between those two, and try to describe that. And It was really fun. It was super challenging, which I really liked. All right, so fast forward to the end of summer, and I picked it back up, and I knew that I had some things that I had to tweak. I knew that there were some things because I'd shelved it for 2 months, but I was still kind of thinking about it. And I knew I had a list of notes that there were things that I wanted to go in and either move around, or like, I don't like this conversation with this guy and I don't like his backstory or whatever it was. So I went in and I started changing some stuff. And that was around around the middle of August is when I kind of got back into it. Right after Labor Day weekend, I printed it out. I'd gotten to the point where I wanted to read it in hard copy. So I sent it over to Office Depot and I printed it out, and it was that fucking thick. And it was really cool when you hold your manuscript in your hand for the first time.
Yeah.
That's a pretty cool feeling. It's like, I just wrote 80 fucking thousand words about 2 characters, and so I read through it, and Katie and I both red inked all over it, and we just tore it to pieces and went back in, and I'm on version 9 now. So version 1 was in June, and here I am, and I'm on version 9, and I'm still changing stuff.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't know what's going to happen. The basic story is there, but what we're doing now is we're kind of going through it, and we're finding like Katie took a purple pen and started reading it, and on like the second page, there was a paragraph where she circled the same word like 5 times in one paragraph. She goes, "You can't do that." Okay, so I have a thesaurus app on my phone now where I can go through and I can find different words, because I'm not a smart guy and I'm a work in progress. So back in, it was about the same time that I printed it out the first time that I was still really stoked on the Benedict Arnold thing. And I was bored one night. I was kind of burnt out on that one, on the first one. The first one I'm calling Course of Action right now. That's the working title that I have right now, is Course of Action. The second one, I was a little bit burnt out on the first one. So I just started kind of making some notes and tinkering. And before you know it, dude, I've got 40,000 words. I'm halfway done with the second book.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah. So it's all Benedict Arnold and my guy. And what was interesting, one of the things that we had to work through was I wanted my character to pop up in these places throughout history. And Katie and I were camping one weekend, and we're just kicking around ideas out by our little table set in the shade one afternoon. And she goes, "Well, he's a time traveler." It's like, no, he's not a time traveler. He can't be a time traveler. I don't want this to be like a sci-fi fucking sciencey thing, right? So after about an hour, we came up with an idea. And I sat down and I started typing it out and really kind of fleshing it out a little bit. So we've got a way now, I think, that the same character pops up all throughout history. So now you've got a series with unlimited fucking potential.
Yeah,
right?
You can go anywhere with it.
Here's one that I'm kicking around. Tell me if you think this idea sucks, right? This is just an idea. I haven't written anything down. I just had this pop in my brain a couple of weeks ago. So my character, he somehow wakes up, manifests, pops out into existence, and he's in a hospital, right? And it's kind of a dimly lit hallway, and there's a guy in a suit that grabs him by the arm, and they walk down the hallway. And when you in a nursery in a hospital, right, there's those glass windows where you can look in from the hallway and see all the babies in there, and some are in blue and some are in pink, and there's this one kid in blue, and the name tag says Adolf Hitler. What does my character do? Right?
Yeah.
And so then that becomes that. Now you've got this really cool thought exercise of, well, he just walks away, and now World War II happens, and all the Holocaust and all that bad shit, right? Or he goes in there and he grabs that little baby by the throat, and there's no more Adolf Hitler. Well, now what are the second and third order effects of that?
Right.
There's no World War II, right? So there's no greatest generation. There's no baby boomers. What happens to the American economy? Where are we at?
Yeah.
So there's things that you haven't really thought through some of these problems yet. And that became a really fun thought exercise.
I bet.
So
yeah.
anyways,
I think that's cool, man.
It's worth kicking it around.
Because you realize, when you look at things in context, especially World War II, like we don't have the Industrial Revolution that we have in this country without that war.
Bingo.
Right. And And we don't become the great superpower
That's right.
without that war. So we were very isolationist before that.
Exactly.
And so
It wasn't like a world economy up
no, there
until
was no
that point.
globalization at that
Exactly.
point. So
Yeah. So how much would really change if there was no Adolf Hitler? Like, how pivotal was that one birth in the shaping of where we're at now?
Well, and you could go so many different ways with it because,
gosh.
right, if World War I still happened, there's still a vacuum of some sense in Germany. And if there was no Adolf, maybe there was something worse.
Yeah.
And maybe the Nazis win the war. And
Could be.
I mean, you could go so many ways with it.
Maybe instead of the Nazis, maybe it's Stalin and Russia, and now they're like the big bad thing. Because I mean, there's so many. There's so many ways different ways. Maybe it's Japan that.
It wouldn't have changed the course for Japan necessarily.
Right. So now it's maybe not a world war, but it's a Pacific war, and those things change, right?
Yeah.
But now look at it from just an American economic standpoint, where you don't have that industrial revolution necessarily. You don't have that military industrial complex boom that we had. You don't have the greatest generation or the baby boomers. So where does that leave me and you?
Yeah, right. Because you would.
What about the technology?
Yeah,
that just skyrocketed. What about women getting into like all the dudes are over in Europe fighting, and the women are holding the fort down back home, building tanks and shit.
Right. Well, and there was no Air Force until after World War II when we discovered that air power was important and it needed to be its own service.
You and I might have flew in the Army.
Yeah,
who knows?
Right. Part of the Army Air Force,
wearing Army wings.
Yeah.
Anyways, it's a fun thing, man.
Yeah,
I like
that's cool.
I like being creative. Okay, so back to the story. So there I was. I've got a manuscript finished. Well, finished in air quotes, right? It needs polishing, right? So I started. I've got a manuscript finished, and I've got one that's half done. And honestly, man, if I put my mind to it, the story's already in my head. I could probably get it out in a month and have 2 manuscripts, 80,000 words each, finished. So I started shopping around. There's a website out there that you can sort and filter for different things like editors or cover designers or interior layout, whatever it is. You can sort and filter for these people that'll help you out. It's not Fiverr; it's a different one. It's built specifically for authors. So I go on there and I'm looking for a developmental editor. The developmental editor is the guy or gal that finds your plot holes. Hey, this character needs more backstory, or this needs to be moved over here. They look for the storyline. It's not like line editing, with syntax errors and grammar errors and shit. So I was looking for maybe a developmental editor to take a look at this and just tell me how bad it sucks so I can fix it. And I picked 5 who were in the historical fiction genre, and I filled out their little form and sent in samples and like a 1-page synopsis and blah, blah, blah. I sent that out to them. And all 5 of them got back to me with their prices. And they were all outside of what I had kind of expected. So I politely declined them and was going to search for somebody maybe on Fiverr or something like that. Well, this one guy, he messages me back and he goes, "Hey, would it help if his price was $2,500. And he says, "Hey, would it help if I knocked off 22 or $250 from it?" And I was kind of joking. I said, "Hey, man, it would really help if you knocked it in half." That was more kind of what I was thinking, somewhere around $1,000, something like that. And he goes, "Well, I can't do that. Sorry." But I went to your website and I read your bio. Have you ever thought about writing a book about flying strike eagles? Well, no, not really, because here's the thing, man. And this is not just being meek or, overly humble or anything like that. I look at my career as slightly average in every way.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything grandiose. Like, there was no big crowning achievement or anything.
Yeah.
I didn't go to weapons school. I wasn't a squadron commander. I wasn't like a fucking general or anything like that. I just kind of did the things, and that was it.
Yeah.
And I like to think that I did them well, but it was perfectly average in every way. And he says, "No, man." He says, like think about it like this. Like, to you, it's perfectly average. To me, it's holy shit, dude. So I started doing some math, and I called Sucka Dietz up, and so Sucka and I started breaking down some math one night. And if you take the adult population of the United States, we came up with somewhere around 250 million people, right? Just working in round numbers. Less than 1%.
Yeah, serve.
Are in the military.
Yep.
So now you're working with this very small demographic of people already, right? You're already in the 1% bracket of adults in America.
Yeah, and then you shave that down
and
to
then
fighter
you shave
pilots.
it down to the Air Force, and then you shave it down to 82% of Air Force personnel are enlisted. That's 18% are officers. So now you've cut out another little sliver. And then you say, how many pilots are? Well, yeah. So how many pilots are there? Less than 12,000. How many of those are fighter pilots? About 3,800. 3,800 people out of 250 million people are fighter pilots. Now, if you want to break it down into WIZZOs, like I was, it's even smaller.
Yeah.
Because there's only two platforms that have WIZZOs right now, the B1 and the F-15, and those communities are both getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah, they're both shrinking.
Right? So we're looking at somewhere around maybe 1,000 WIZZOs total, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the guy helped me understand that it is special. It is unique. It like statistically, I worked out the math. Statistically, you are nearly as likely to get struck by lightning. I'm not kidding. Look it up.
Yeah, I'm sure.
You can Google it, and you can do the math project just like I did. And it comes out to something like this: 0.3% of 0.5% of 0.5%. Like statistical anomalies.
Yeah.
We are the outlier up in the upper right of the bell curve that people go, oh, that guy? Don't worry about that little guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So this guy and I, we started having a conversation, and I told him, I said, well, now you have my attention. Okay, let's discuss. So we got on the phone and we talked for about an hour. And he says, tell you what, because I have a ton of questions at this point, right? I mean, I'm just like the questions are just fucking, it's like machine gun fire in my brain right now. And the guy says, I tell you what, he says, write me up a 1-page. If you were to do this, think through it for a week. How do you think you would frame it? How do you think you would tell this story? How do you think you would break it down? Give me a 1-pager on it and send it back to me, and we'll start from there. So that was on like a Thursday, about, I don't know, 3 weeks ago. And so I spent the weekend thinking about it. Katie and I talked a lot about it, and I came up with some sections. I came up with some chapters. I came up with some ideas. And I started typing some stuff out, and it came out to about 2 pages the way that I had envisioned it. And then I just decided, well, you know what? Let me see if I can even do this. Right. So I started writing out the story of my first flight in the Strike Eagle. And I tried really hard to make you see and smell and feel like, what's it like to walk out on the flight line the first time?
It's well, and that, I think writing about flying too, it's hard because it's so sensory.
It is. It's such a physical thing.
And well, and it's not just such a physical thing, but it's so mental too, to a certain extent too, right? I think that would be a very difficult environment to describe well.
It is.
Which is why most people, it's hard to talk about with people that haven't done it, because it's really hard to put it in context where they can really understand it. Like it's almost one of those things that you have to do to understand.
Here's something that we take for granted, right? We've both experienced this.
Yeah.
We're sitting in the cockpit and we want to turn right. And on paper you would write, I turned right.
Yeah. That's not what you do.
And maybe I pulled 4 Gs, right? But what you don't understand is when you do that, when you roll to the right, the whole world spins 90 degrees. And now like your inner ears are going crazy, and your
Oh.
equilibrium gets fucked up. And the first time you do that, and the world like what the first time you did a barrel roll, and the entire Earth spun around your jet,
Yeah.
because it's all relative to you,
Yeah.
right? You don't
Yeah.
feel the jet moving; you see the world moving around you.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so weird, right?
It is. Well, and it's not just that, but like, yeah, I turned right. Well, did I? Because I mean, yeah, I went in that direction, but where was my lift vector? How much G did I need? What am I doing with the
Exactly.
power?
What did I do with
Because
my left hand and
what's
right
the
hand when I did
airspeed I
that?
want to come out
Yeah.
in this thing with? What am I doing? You know, am I hooking back for an air-to-air engagement? And I've got
Right.
I'm pitching to a crank,
Yeah.
and so I'm setting my radar up in the turn so that I can get this guy,
Oh, by the
tag
way,
him, and
I'm not
shoot.
looking straight. I'm
Yeah.
looking over there somewhere.
Yeah,
Which
you
is why
know,
we all have
so,
bad necks now, and
exactly.
I can't. So yeah, so I wrote out the story. It came out to about 2,500 words or so, which is about, I don't know, four or five typewritten pages, in a book format, and it was walking out of the ops building, wearing all your shit.
Yeah.
Right. It's North Carolina in June.
It's hot.
It's hot
You're
as
sweating.
fuck. It's humid as fuck. And you know, flight suits are zipped up. G suits are zipped up. I got this fucking 5-pound mission cart dangling, smacking me in the fucking fupa the whole time.
Yeah.
We got the LPUs on, earplugs are in, and we're walking out to the jets. I mean, the exhaust, the heat of the
Smell,
flight
the
line,
jet fuel.
the temperature goes up 15 degrees when you hit the flight line because of all the concrete and
Yeah.
the jets, and then you add the exhaust on top of that, and we go pre-flight the jet. You know, what's it like getting into the cockpit the first time and strapping in through that whole process with all that shit on and building your nest and then cranking up engines. And then my very first flight in the jet, I had to fix my own red ball with the JFS low light. So talking through all that, and then, you know, you go take off, and I'll be honest with you, man, I don't really remember the rest of the flight. It was a TR flight, so it was probably, you know, LAO type stuff, local area. Here's all the points. Here's the Neuse River. Here's the barbecue shack that we pitch out over, you know, that kind of shit. But I don't really remember all that. But I remember walking out to that flight line, like that is burnt in my brain. The first time I took off and we flew out to the whiskey areas out past Cherry Point, I don't really remember that too much. I remember going over the coast and seeing, you know, land to ocean transition. That was kind of neat. You know, we went out and did a couple of loops, I'm sure. And then we came back, we pitched out, and I don't really remember too much after that. But so I wrote that whole part out, right? And I sent in the 2 pages that was the synopsis, and then the 3 or 4 pages that was kind of that first story. And I said, here's kind of the way I envision telling some of these stories, right? Really try to put you in the cockpit and feel and see and taste and smell the things that I experienced. And so he says, all right, got it. Cool, dude. I'm going to send this over to my publisher and we'll see where it goes. He usually gets back to us in about 7 days. It's about a 7 business day turnaround for him to read through it, make his decision and whatever. Less than 24 hours later, I got an email from him. He says, hey, we're good to go. I'm sending you a contract.
That's fucking awesome, dude.
So where we sit right now is he sent me, yeah, it's fucking cool, right? So he sent me an example, like a sample contract, and he just wanted me to have like an idea of what they were,
what it
would look like, you know, so that I could take a minute to digest it and everything. I think I forgot to add this detail, but this guy, random dude that I picked off of this website, he happened to be he's a consultant, an editorial consultant. He is the senior editorial consultant for a publishing company. And that's not in his bio anywhere.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
I found this out after he reached back out to me and says, hey, have you ever thought about doing something like this? Oh, by the way, I am da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, oh, okay, let's have a conversation.
Yeah.
So I took the sample contract and I talked to him for a long time on the phone because now I have even more questions.
Yeah,
like a million and 10 questions. So I took the sample contract and I just went through and highlighted and made comments and asked my questions and all that and sent it back to him. That was on Thursday. And he says, yeah, I'll have it back to you early next week with answers to your questions and the actual contract. Yeah. So, I wanted to tell that. Okay, so end of story. But I wanted to tell you that story not as hashtag humble brag. I wanted to tell that story because let's go back to March. You and I, and we did. We put together a men's group of people, right?
A beta group,
and they were hand selected in various age demographics, broken up, and they're all in different phases of life, and they all have different goals and pursuits. And to a man, every one of those guys, every person in that group has either set and is working to or has reached the goal that they've set.
Yeah.
And it all comes down to persistence and trying new shit and not being afraid to learn and finding mentors and having a growth mindset. I mean, all the shit that we talk about all the time has come out.
Like,
and just go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt your train of thought.
One thing that I was going to add on to there was on a whim, by a fucking just total chance, I decided that I was going to try to write a fiction novel. And the experience of writing nearly 150,000 words of just making shit up has put me in such a better position to do something like this now. But because I know how to tell a story. Now I know how to weave the characters through it.
Yeah.
You know, you've got this scaffolding of a career, and then you've got me and Katie and the kids are the main characters going to go through this thing.
Yeah.
Right. And so having that experience and putting in the time and doing those reps, it's the shit that we talk about all the time, man. It's like, you just never know how something that you do over here is going to set you up for something else over here.
That's right. Well, and it goes back to, you know, and in some ways, like how you created opportunity for yourself, right? Because, you know, to reach out to people you don't know, like the English professor, you know, and go, hey man, can you help me out with this? You know, and to ask for help, right? To have the humility to go, hey man, I'm not sure.
I'm an idiot.
I don't know what I'm doing. Can you give me a vector here, right?
Yeah.
And then, or, you know, just reaching out to those individual editors, having conversations with them, kind of putting yourself out there, which can be very uncomfortable,
vulnerable,
and is a very vulnerable position, right? Because I mean, you know, you hear all the stories about all the famous authors and how many times they got manuscripts 100%. Rejected, you know, over and over and over and over again, and that can't be great for your, you know, your sense of self-worth and ego.
It's tough.
You know, you get that kind of feedback consistently. But by doing that, you know, you actually, by getting outside of your comfort zone, by getting in the arena and just going to task with it in learning and doing the nug work, the stuff that's not easy to do, taking feedback that probably at sometimes might not have been so easy to take.
Very difficult.
Like your character sucks. You know, you might want to fix it. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, no, he's like, the guy gave me the feedback that his first line, and when he sent me the email back, his first line was, I don't like your character. I don't care about your character. I'm like, well, that fucking sucks because I really like him. I think he's cool. And he goes, yeah, but I don't. Yeah. So you have to make me like the guy.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Yeah. But, you know, that's like we've talked about so many times on the podcast. That's how you create opportunity, right? That's how you open doors. You have those chance encounters, and they're not really chance encounters. They're encounters that you created for yourself because you had the courage to step into that vulnerable, uncomfortable place and reach out, and look what transpires from that.
Well, you know, and I think it comes down to, two things really stand out to me, right? Is it took me a long time and a lot of consultation with some people to help me understand that when you do things like this, right? And dude, like, I never in a million years thought that I was going to write books. It was never even a blip on my radar.
Sure.
Right. It just happened. I like to tell stories, and I've always enjoyed writing stuff down, but I never thought about doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And somebody gave me some great advice a few years ago when I was starting to do the first book, No New Lessons. He said, if you're writing books to make money, you're writing them for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And that's just always stuck to me, you know, and I'm like, well, this is fun. It's a hobby. It's an outlet for me. It gives me a chance to energize that creative side of me. And it's very personal. Like I can write 10,000 words about my character and then hit the delete button.
Yeah.
And nobody knows.
Yeah.
You know, and so that it makes it very intimate to me. And it's similar to journaling, where it's just very personal. But here's the thing, like the flip side of that coin is at some point you have to put that out there to people.
Yeah.
At some point you have to kind of close your eyes and go, here it is, and that is very intimidating. It's very, you're very vulnerable in that point. One of the things that one of the guys that I was talking to, he's actually become kind of a trusted soul to me, but he says, man, you're an artist. You're a creator. You're an artist. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm not a fucking artist, man. I break shit and kill people.
Yeah.
And he goes, no.
I'm a knuckle dragger.
You're an artist. You're an artist, man. And this is your art. And these are your thoughts. And these are your ideas. These are your stories and all that. And it took me a long time to really accept that. Well, what happens when you're an artist and you put shit out there to people? They're going to like it or they're not.
Yeah.
Right. There's very few that are just like, nah, and walk away, like the first few records that an artist puts out, that's intimidating to them. The first few times that they write a song and then perform it, or a comedian going up there working out his material,
Well, it goes back to it is right. And it's scary because when you're in those vulnerable positions, none of us want to be judged. None of us want to be critiqued.
Yeah.
None of us want spears thrown our way, the trolls and all that stuff. Like, that's a scary place. I remember when we were first talking about doing the podcast, I'm an introvert. I don't like the fucking spotlight. And I remember you at one time looking at me and going, are you sure you're ready to put yourself out there? Like, thoughts and ideas, and that kind of took me back a second. Cause I was like, we're just sitting across the table talking to each other. Who the fuck's going to listen to this anyways? Right. But
there's about 6.9 people that listen to this.
Yeah. And half of them are our family. So,
right. Actually, that's false. I can't get my family to listen to it.
Yeah. And so, it's a vulnerable place to be, man, to put yourself out there. But that's that courage over comfort we talk about, right? That's that stepping outside your comfort zone, getting in the arena, doing the work, getting muddy and dirty and bloodied and sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. I mean, we have an advantage because we have thick skin to begin with, just because of how we grew up.
There's that.
So
I
don't
think it's
really
kind of like,
care what.
Here it is, fuck it, But there is a piece of me that, it kind of is that, just kick the door open and burst in with your chest out.
Yeah.
Here it is, motherfuckers. But then there's a part of me that goes, but I really want it to be good.
Yeah.
Like, and I know it's probably not good right now. So please just give me really good feedback on it.
Be honest with me.
Be honest. And if it sucks, tell me it sucks. But more importantly, tell me why it sucks.
Yeah.
Tell me how I can make it
fix
not
it.
suck.
Yeah.
Because I really want to get good at it. Like, I'm trying to find, like, I don't know, maybe you're a sports guy and you're taking up, like Doc John, he plays soccer on the side.
Yeah.
And if you want to be really good at soccer, you have to practice soccer.
So let's, like, Doc John's a good example though, because what I was thinking of is, how do you relate this back? Because we talk a lot about, I think in general, people talk a lot about, find your passion, find what you're passionate about. And you don't have to work a day in your life. Like, there's truth to that. If you're fortunate enough to be like we were, where we knew what we wanted to do at a young age, and then we were able to go through the steps to make that happen.
But what does that really mean, though? It means find something that gives you fulfillment.
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you may have certain skill sets that you're really good at that afford you a path in a certain direction, but maybe it's not necessarily something that you're overly passionate about, right? But maybe making money and having a good income provides you the flexibility, like you've talked about in our age now, to pursue
I see where you're
those
going with
things in order to find that one thing that you can be passionate about, or
it's like working a job that you hate because it pays well and you get to spend a lot of time with your kids.
Well, and it may not be that you necessarily hate it, but it may not be something that you're necessarily passionate about. But what it does is it gives you opportunity in life to pursue other things, to maybe get the opportunity to find what that thing is. Like, I don't think Doc John would be doing what he was doing and focused in the way that he is. And I think the reason that he's so engaged with what he does is because he loves sports and he loved that dynamic.
Yeah.
It's kind of we talked about this previously too, right? Like, if you're an athlete and your dream's to be, in the NFL or the NBA or Major League Baseball or Major League Soccer or whatever it is, and you don't have the skill or you have an injury or something prevents you from getting there, well, ask yourself, what is it about that thing that you
Yeah.
care about so much?
Yeah,
Is
break
it
it
the
down.
team
Yeah.
dynamic? Is it you like that environment, that team environment? Is it
Mhm.
the strategy? Is it the teaching? You know, what is it? Because you can still do those things. You can go be
Just not wear the
a head
uniform.
coach
Yeah.
or a coordinator. Like you can work your way up through the ranks to
Yep,
stay
yep.
in that environment that you enjoy for whatever those reasons are. You know, and so my point in saying that is, you know, if you hadn't started writing your first book, you wouldn't know any of this yet, right?
Yeah.
But the fact that you just went, dude, I'm going to try this,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm going to step out
Yep.
and try to do this. Or like Doc John, you know, my soccer career is over. Well, how can I continue
But I
to
can
do
still
the
be
things
involved.
that
Yeah.
I enjoy about this, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'll go get my psychology degree and I'll go become a, you know,
Yeah.
PhD or
Whatever the hell
I'm
he
really
is.
fucking smart and I'll figure all this shit out, right? So, but yeah, I mean, I think that that's important for people to recognize, because I don't know that everybody finds their passion right away. Like Alicia's a great example, man. She didn't know what she really wanted to
Yeah.
do until she got in her 30s,
That's okay though.
you know?
Yeah.
But she had a job in the interim that gave her the flexibility to flesh some of that stuff out for
Yeah.
herself, you know? So yeah, I think it's super cool, man.
Well, you know, and let's not skim over the fact that regardless of whether it's, you know, you're pivoting to psychology or you're Alicia and you're getting into social science and all that stuff, or if you're Roscoe trying to learn how to write books, it takes a lot of hard work. And dude, I wish that I had cataloged all of the hours that I spent watching YouTube videos and listening to other authors on podcasts and reading about how to do some of these things and transitions.
Sure.
And I mean, and it's everything from like things that you just don't think about. Like there are formats that you can use to your advantage. Example, there are books out there where you might have 10 chapters in the whole book and they're 50 pages each. Then there are books out there like James Patterson was, I learned this through the research. James Patterson was kind of the pioneer of the short chapters and keep the pacing going really fast. Just scene, really fast chapters. You know, how often do you watch a movie where a single scene is more than about 5 or 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Like very rarely, right?
Yeah.
It's usually like the movie is moving,
always moving,
right? And he kind of pioneered that, and now so many other authors do that. And then there's other authors who their chapters are very long-winded, you know, and both work for whatever you're trying to do. But these are things that you have to learn and you have to think about. You know?
Well, and I think your story is powerful too because you know you wrote No New Lessons, which was just I think kind of a fun thing and something that you always wanted to do just to get that story out there.
I wrote that to capture the memory.
Yeah,
that was it.
And then you did Work Hard, Don't Suck, and
for my kids.
Yep. But I would also say, based on our conversations, that you were a little disappointed with the rollout and how that went.
Very much.
Yep. And that it would have been really easy right there to go, you know, maybe I'm not cut out for this, right? Maybe I didn't get the expectation that I had when I released this book was not met. So therefore, maybe this isn't my thing, right? But you didn't do that, dude. What'd you do?
Kept going.
You went to task, right? And you made a pivot, and you're like, "Well, fuck, maybe I'll do some fiction and see how that goes, right? And see how and all of these things because you didn't quit, because you took the lessons learned from the previous one and kept learning. You know, you pivoted, dude. You're getting ready to sign a contract with a publisher next week.
Now, like I hadn't really thought about it like that, and what was really super disappointing about Work Hard, Don't Suck was, like, No New Lessons wasn't really a passion project. It was a fun,
it was more fun.
Oh, this is fun. I'm going to make it a funny kind of book and it'll be a wild ride and it's an adventure, right? But I really felt like I was really invested in Work Hard, Don't Suck. I had a reason why I was doing it, and I put a lot of effort into that, and there was a lot of emotion wrapped up in that book.
Yeah, well, it paralleled so much too, I think at the time, the work that you and I were trying to do to create,
It did.
and the messaging that you and I were trying to create, and the lessons learned that we are trying to pass on through the podcast, to people.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I could see where that
Yeah.
would be really, especially in that time frame, because they kind of aligned with each other.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it wasn't just that. It was the timeline the kids were on.
Yeah.
And I
That's
needed,
true too. Yeah.
yeah, like everything about that book, I had so much invested in it, and then I rolled it out, and it kind of just went. And I was like, well, fuck, man, that didn't work out the way I envisioned it. They talk about visualization, and I had visualized and I had chair flown through the rollout and what it was supposed to look like, and what it was supposed to like Tears of Joy when it hit bestseller and all this stuff, and then it just kind of went bleh. And I was like, well, fuck, that's not the way I saw it.
But what did you learn through the process of doing Work Hard, Don't Suck?
I learned a ton. I learned a ton about first of all, it was the writing, it was the planning, the organization, like that was a big piece of it. All of those things, I learned a lot about the rollout, the cover design.
Building your cover design. I remember talking about that with you for a long time.
But when it came to, so like, here's something, right? So my folder for Work Hard, Don't Suck, there are 60 subfolders in there, and each one of those is a chapter in the book. You can't do that with fiction.
Yeah.
Because it's a continuous story that
you got to weave it all together.
So how do you organize that, man? I had written like I had probably written nearly 20,000 words in a Word document, and I was fucking lost.
Yeah.
Like I was all over the place. If I wanted to find one specific thing to either remind myself or maybe I wanted to move it or edit it or something like that,
where do you find it? Yeah, it's so dense. Becomes so dense.
Pages. So I did a lot of research, and I found a program out there. It's called Scrivener, and I'll show you an example of it. But you basically write your chapters in folders, and it's almost like an outline, and you keep them, and you can move the folders up. It makes it super easy, and then when you compile it, it puts it right into a Word document. So, but these are all things that I didn't know until I started getting in it. Yeah. And I started doing it, and I hit a roadblock. I'm like, what the fuck, man? This is insurmountable. How do I fix this? Well, a little bit of research, a little bit of reading, a little bit of consulting with other people, and I found something. I found a solution to it. So all these things, everything points right back to everything that we talk about on the Be One Change One show. And I thought that was a really good story. And first of all, I'm very proud, right? I'm very excited. And it gets better. You
should be.
It gets fucking better. So, the publishing company, the publishing company, I'm not going to put the name out there just yet, right? I'll save that for a little bit. So back in, I don't know, March or so, my good friend Mike Capuzzi, shout out to Mike Capuzzi over at Bite Size Books. He has a podcast that he calls the Author Factor Podcast, right? And he interviews nonfiction authors on his show. It's about a 30-minute show or so. You should go check it out. It's pretty good. Lots of really good stories. He just did a 250th episode. Well, he had this guy on there who had just published a book through a publisher about the Arghandab Valley, about being he was a platoon sergeant in the Arghandab Valley back in like 2010, 2011 timeframe. Yeah. When it was very hot down there. I was in the Arghandab Valley December 10 to May 11. Very hot. I mean, just IEDs everywhere, people getting blown up, body parts, like medevacs. We would hear double and triple amputees. I mean, it was very bloody down there, and he was part of that fight, and he wrote a good book about it. So Mike puts me in touch with this guy. We had a good conversation. We're going to have him on the show. I have his book. It's just a matter of timing now. So he and I were talking, I don't know, a month ago or so, 2 months ago. And he says, hey man, I was asking him, do you know anybody in the publishing world that you could hook me up with that does historical fiction? He goes, oh, well, the publisher that I published with, they just opened a military historical fiction department. So send me over your manuscript and I'll put it to my editor. So I did. So I sent it to him, right? Fast forward, and now I'm in touch with this dude from the guy who's going to send me the contract, right? And I asked him, I went to their website and I scoured it through and I found they have a military historical fiction department. And I said, hey, just for shits and grins, do you know anything about this? He goes, no, but I'll ask the question. So now those two publishers, right? The one company over here that I'm talking to about to sign a contract with, the other company that I've got a good friend that's going to put me in touch with his editor, all right? One is a sub to the other.
Oh.
One is the UK version and one is the US version. So now I've got two avenues to run a pincer attack on these two publishers with my two fiction manuscripts.
Nice.
So I'm really keeping my fingers crossed that'll flesh out.
Well, I think what's great about your story too is for the listeners out there is you guys we're trying to do all the same stuff that we talk about on a regular basis. Like you and I are trying to be value added. We're trying to improve ourselves on a day-to-day basis.
Trying new shit.
Yeah, we're still going out there and exploring and trying to figure out what's next and what can we do and what's the next adventure? What's the next thing that we want to try? What's the next skill that we want to build? So
that's right.
That's how you do it, man.
Well, I mean, you look at the people who are in that group, right? There's you and I and the things that we've achieved in this calendar year. There's David and Tyler, who have achieved great things. The other dude is he's about to complete his year-long goal, probably here in the next couple of weeks. I'm just waiting on an update to him. Devin sent me a text message the other day. It was funny. He says, hey, I got some good news for you in a week. And I was like, well, that's, tell me now, like, are you pregnant? What the fuck?
Yeah.
And he goes, no, he says, next week I finished my bachelor's degree.
Yeah. That's so awesome.
And it gets better. He, because of what we had talked about in that men's group, he started sniffing around and he found a way through the VA to pay for his master's degree. So he's just going to keep right on going.
That's awesome,
and finish his So like, dudes, the point is, if you're listening to this, if you've been with us for the last 52 minutes, the point is this shit works.
Yeah, it does.
It does. It works, man. And if you're just willing to fucking try it and do the work put yourself out there
and take the lumps. It's not going to be easy.
It's not always pretty. And there's a lot of frustrating days. And you know what? There was a lot of friction between Katie and I because I was so into this other world.
Yeah.
Every thought through my brain was these two characters.
Was focused on that.
And she goes, hey, I'm still over here. Remember me? I'm the wife, and we had to sit down, talk. And I had to go, whoa. And kind of like we were talking about in the pregame, you got to notch out some time.
Yeah.
And it comes down to scheduling and organization. And, there's a time and a place to do these things.
Yeah.
And so I encourage the listeners, man, fucking try it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, dude. And I'm super proud of you. Like, that's just,
thanks.
Well, I am like, I mean, like it's all the things we talk about, and the fact that you didn't give up, you just kept going, you made your pivots, you took your lessons learned, you weren't afraid of the failure piece, like you're much better. I would really struggle with reaching out to people I don't know and asking questions or asking for help. That's a tough place for me to go. And some of that's I think my introvertedness to a certain extent. It's not that I would struggle with harsh feedback or, I just, as an introvert, it's really difficult for me to just do that. You know what I mean?
It is very difficult, but something that we always used to teach our kids, like if they were having a problem with their teacher at school, we made them go and solve it. Like you have to go up to your teacher and talk to them.
Yeah.
And find resolution here. And the answer might be no, but you never know if you don't ask.
That's true.
And that was the big thing, right? Is I'm behind in my grades. I haven't turned in my homework a bunch and, finals are coming up and I don't want a shitty grade. Go ask your teacher if there's anything you can do. Maybe she'll give you a chance to do all the homework over a weekend and you can just barricade yourself in your room and knock it out and you turn that F into a C and that brings your overall average up.
Yeah.
But you don't know if you don't ask.
That's true.
Right?
And we've said that before as well, right? Like if the answer is no, well, nothing's changed. So it doesn't really make a difference, right? But you don't get to yes unless you ask the question.
That's right.
So
that's right. And the path to yes might not be linear.
It's very seldom is it.
It might be a big fucking figure eight in a lot of places, and you might find yourself spinning your wheels and you might get stuck on something.
Well, and I think your story too speaks to the concept that we've discussed about focus on the process, not the outcome, right?
That's a big
Like
thing.
that's a huge thing, man, because what'd you do? You went to task on the process. You went to task on how do I become a better writer? How do I learn how to do this? How do I make, you know, how do I do all of these things that are going to be required of me? How do I shift, you know, from what I've written in the past to now writing in this other
completely
genre,
fucking different,
right? That's so different. And so you went to task and you focused on the process. And I'm sure along the way you set little individual goals, you know, and benchmarks to try to make. And then, you know, you either hit them or you didn't, and then you readjust, you come back up with new ones, and you keep moving the ball forward, right? Sometimes it's an inch at a time. Sometimes it's one step forward, two steps back, right? Like we talked about in Hidden Potential, that path is never linear, man. Like it's
a squiggly line.
You're winding around, you know, to get to the mountaintop, you're typically winding around the mountain. And sometimes you fall off the cliff, you know, and go down 150 feet and get banged up and beat up. And then you got to kind of regroup, regather, and start your way back up that cliff or up that mountainside again. And so, yeah, and that's what you did, brother. You focused on all of those things and learned these skills and developed skills and refined skills, and then now we're here.
Well, you know, and as we're getting close to kind of wrapping up, I think it was Stephen King that I heard this from, and he says, you can't edit what hasn't been written. And dude, when you apply that to life, try something, right? And it probably will suck, right? You're not going to nail it on the first try, but our first podcast that we did it 3 times. Because the first one we were like, yo, that was terrible. Throw that one away. The second one was even worse because worse thinking about it. And so we finally took a deep breath and we're like, okay, guys, just fucking breathe. Let's work on just being natural.
Yeah, let's just talk to each other.
And it took us probably 10 or 15 episodes to get to where we do this well.
Yeah.
You know, just this kind of back and forth. And so you can't edit what hasn't been written. So try version 1. And by the time you get to version 20, maybe you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe it's going to be good at that point. And the other one that I liked from Brad Thor, I was listening to a podcast with him on it. And Brad Thor, he writes these thriller novels that I like. And he says, give yourself the opportunity to write a shitty chapter.
Yeah.
Like just fucking get it out. And I can't tell you how many times I did that, man. I would be stuck on this one thing and I would just like, okay, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to fucking, here it goes. And I'd knock it out and it would take me an hour and I would get it and I'd be like, that fucking sucks. Delete, start over, you know? But getting that first iteration, you're like, okay, got that out of my system.
Yeah.
Now I can massage it and now I can move it around. And so try shit, guys. Get out there.
Yeah.
Put yourself
Find
out
what
there.
works for you.
Try something, you know, and maybe it's not your passion right off the bat, but maybe it leads to something, you know, like I started journaling and I kept on one deployment, I kept a dream log. Like every dream that I had a notebook beside my bed with a pencil on it. And I would wake up in the middle of the night, wouldn't even open my eyes. I'd wake up, I'd reach over and grab my pen and I would just, he did this and there was this and there was this one guy. And then I'd go back to sleep. And at the end of the deployment, I've got like 50 pages of dreams that I had. And
that's crazy.
You talk about hilarious, man. But all of those little exercises that I'd done over all these years led me to a point where now I'm comfortable sitting down with a blank screen on a computer and going, my character did this.
Yep.
And you go from there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's how it works.
It's fun, man.
Dude, I'm happy for you, brother.
Oh, thanks.
That's badass.
Yeah, it's cool. So that was something you didn't plan on.
No, but that was a good pivot, man.
Fucking curveball.
That was a good audible.
So
it's a good story.
What the listeners don't know is every episode that we do, Cass always has his computer open and he's always glancing down, looking at his notes and shit, where I have squiggly lines on my paper now, but otherwise it's usually a blank sheet. So the fact that you even closed your computer and we were able to have a good discussion, I think that's a win.
Yeah, no doubt, brother.
Awesome, dude. What else?
Be the change.
All right, be the one. Thanks for flying with the Be One Change One podcast. If you got something out of this show, then be the one and share it in your circles of influence.
You can be our wingman through our website at www.be1change1.com. That's B and the number 1, change and the number 1.com.
We invite you to be the one and join our fighter squadron on social media at Be1Change1 on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can follow us at Paul Roscoe White on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, as well as Roscoe's website, www.paulroscoewhite.com.
You can email us from the website, and please leave comments, share, and ask questions, or leave ideas of things you would like to discuss on future podcasts. Most importantly, be the one that helps us win the algorithm by leaving a review on whatever platform you're listening on.
Thanks for joining. Until next time, be the one.